At Falcon Ridge, cadets sneer at Emma Riley, the soft-spoken medic they call Ghost, believing she doesn't belong. But when a dog tag falls during a critical evaluation and catches General Barrett's eye, everything changes. The hand-carved numbers etched into the tag unravel a secret buried in classified silence. Operation Nightfall. As Barrett recounts how Emma stayed behind enemy lines for 72 hours to save 11 lives, including his own, the squad's perception shatters. The cadet they dismissed is revealed to be a true war hero, but this is only the beginning. A deeper legacy of quiet strength is about to unfold. If Emma's quiet courage inspired you, don't just scroll away, support our mission. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to my channel for more powerful tales of resilience and true strength. Join us in honoring heroes who whisper, not shout. She couldn't even shout a command. How was she supposed to save anyone like that? Maybe she belonged back in the medical corps nursery. One cadet scoffed loud enough that the entire squad turned their heads. The mockery echoed across the field, but Emma Riley didn't flinch. Her head remained bowed, her hands steady as she packed her medical kit with quiet precision. She acted as though the jab hadn't landed, as though their word bounced off some invisible armor. To them, she was the easy target, the medic no one expected much from, the woman who looked like she'd be more at home changing bandages than standing in combat support drills. But beneath that quiet exterior was something no one bothered to look for, something real. Then came the moment everything changed. A dog tag slipped from someone's neck and landed in the dirt. A general stooped to pick it up, his fingers brushing the metal. But it wasn't the name that made him freeze. It was the series of numbers carved by hand on the back, numbers tied to a classified mission, a mission buried so deep in silence that even whispers of it could raise suspicion. The general stood still, his face pale. Around him the field grew silent. The constant shuffle of boots in the barked commands halted as if time itself had been interrupted. And in that breathless pause, a hidden truth crept out into the open. At Falcon Ridge Training Center, everything was noise. Boots thundered across hard-packed earth. Instructors roared until their voices cracked, and the roar of jets overhead was constant. It was a place built to strip cadets down and rebuild them into soldiers. A place that defined strength in decibels. How loud you could yell, how hard you could slam into a wall during obstacle courses, how aggressively you carried yourself in a uniform. The louder you were, the more respect you got. Amidst that chaos moved Emma Riley. At 28, Emma was neither imposing nor loud. Her blonde hair was always tied neatly at the base of her neck, her movements sharp but never forceful. She had a gentle, almost delicate appearance, the kind people described as kind without really knowing her. She was slim, soft-spoken, unassuming, everything Falcon Ridge didn't celebrate. During weapons training, she was precise but never showy. During medical drills, her touch was steady and purposeful. She didn't bark orders when chaos broke out. Her voice barely rose above the noise, but somehow the injured always heard her. They always listened, but her peers didn't. They didn't care about competence if it didn't come wrapped in noise and bravado. She should be back in the medical corps, someone muttered again, this time with a smirk. Maybe she got lost and wandered into the wrong unit, another cadet added with a chuckle. Laughter spread like wildfire. It didn't faze Emma. She continued adjusting her aid kit, securing every strap, checking and rechecking her supplies with clinical focus. Her calm was misread as weakness, her silence mistaken for insignificance. They started calling her Ghost, not because she was stealthy or mysterious, but because she barely registered on their radar. She seemed to drift through drills unnoticed, never demanding attention, never asserting herself in the ways they understood. They underestimated her. They overlooked her. They didn't know what they were looking at, and watching Emma reminded me of someone from my own past. Back when I was a kid, we lived next door to a man named Mr. Reynolds. He was so soft-spoken you had to lean in just to catch what he was saying at neighborhood barbecues or town meetings. He never raised his voice, never bragged, never told stories about himself. I can't remember ever hearing him string together more than 2 or 3 sentences. To most folks, he was just the quiet old guy with the nice yard and a polite smile. Then one summer day, a kid from down the street fell into the river behind our neighborhood. The water was high that year, the current fast from the spring rains. The boy slipped and vanished into the current before anyone could react. Before anyone could even scream for help, Mr. Reynolds was running barefoot down the muddy bank. He dove straight in. I still remember the sight of him, his head bobbing above the current, arms slicing through the water with purpose. He reached that boy, pulled him from the river's grip, and carried him to shore. He handed him back to his sobbing mother without saying a word. Then he walked back home, soaked to the bone as if it were nothing. That moment stuck with me. It changed the way I thought about people like Mr. Reynolds, like Emma Riley. Society trains us to equate strength with volume. We're told that if you're not shouting, not commanding attention, then you must not be strong. But that's a lie. Some of the strongest people I've ever known are the quiet ones, the ones who don't need to be seen to act, who stay steady when others panic, who move with purpose, not for applause, but because it's the right thing to do. Emma Riley was one of those people. At Falcon Ridge, no one saw her. Not yet. They thought strength was all about noise, about dominance and force. But Emma was a different kind of strength. The kind that whispers, the kind that endures, the kind that doesn't ask for a spotlight because it's already burning steady in the dark. The world always seems solid until the moment it starts to shake beneath your feet. And soon, very soon, they'd all realize just how mistaken they'd been. That morning, the sun rose heavy over Falcon Ridge, casting long blade-like shadows across the training grounds. A hushed tension gripped the cadets as they prepared for the most demanding test of their training to date, Strategic Skills Evaluation Day. The air crackled with nervous energy. This was the moment everything they'd learned would be measured: field medicine, tactical maneuvers, and decision-making in high-stress situations. Instructors barked sharp commands, boots pounded the gravel, squads scrambled into formation. There would be no do-overs, no second chances. But none of them, not even the instructors, could have anticipated the unannounced visitor. General Barrett, a name that echoed through Falcon Ridge like a myth woven with steel. His presence struck a strange chord of reverence and fear in everyone who had heard of him. He didn't travel with bodyguards, didn't announce his arrival. He just appeared, silent, sharp-eyed, and commanding. Stepping onto the grounds without a word, the very air seemed to recognize him, quieting in his wake. Even the loudest instructors found themselves lowering their voices. They said he'd seen more war zones than candles on birthday cakes. That where Barrett walked, futures were altered, some for the better, some broken beyond repair. Emma Riley didn't notice him at first. She was too focused, entirely absorbed in stabilizing a simulated casualty. She knelt in the dirt, movements steady and deliberate, her hands precise as she applied a tourniquet. Around her, the chaos surged, cadets shouting orders, trying to impress with volume over competence. But Emma moved differently, silently, intentionally, almost as if she belonged to another world, one where the noise didn't matter. Then, without warning, something small yet significant happened. As she leaned in to wrap a bandage, the chain of her dog tag caught on the edge of her pouch. A sharp metallic ping broke the rhythm, and the tag snapped, falling into the dust by her boots. Emma didn't flinch. Her mind was still with her patient, but someone else saw it. From a distance, General Barrett had been watching, observing not just performance, but intention. The brief flash of metal in the morning sun snagged his attention like a flare. Without a word, he crossed the field, boots crunching softly beneath him. He stooped to pick up the tag, turning it over between his fingers. He expected the ordinary: name, blood type, service number. But what he saw made his eyes narrow. The numbers etched along the edge weren't standard. They weren't engraved by military issue. These were hand-carved, crude, purposeful, deeply familiar to Barrett in a way that instantly stiffened his spine. Earth 327, 13. His fingers tightened slightly around the tag. Color drained subtly from his face. A shallow, involuntary breath escaped him, just enough for those closest to notice. And then, one by one, the voices on the field began to fall silent. Something had changed. Barrett straightened, holding the tag delicately between his thumb and forefinger. He turned slowly, his gaze finding Emma. In that moment, his eyes looked older, haunted, full of memories he had buried long ago. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the stillness like a sharpened knife. Who carved these? Emma finally looked up. She brushed a strand of hair from her cheek with calm ease. Her face revealed nothing. No fear, no nerves. Just quiet certainty. I did, sir, she said, her voice low but unwavering. The silence that followed was suffocating. All around her, the cadets who once whispered doubts behind her back, who mocked her for being too quiet, too soft, now stared, unsettled, confused. Barrett's hand trembled, not from weakness, but from the gravity of what those numbers represented. He inhaled slowly, the kind of breath a man takes to hold back ghosts clawing at the edges of his memory. These numbers, he began, turning now to address the entire field. His voice, though controlled, carried the weight of something far greater than they understood, and no one dared to speak. Carrying with her a quiet power that demanded no volume, Emma Riley stood still as General Barrett spoke words that shifted the atmosphere like a seismic tremor. His voice didn't need to rise. It carried weight in its calm. Mark this moment, he began, pausing just long enough for every cadet's attention to lock in place. Most of you have never heard this name, and truthfully, you never should have. Operation Nightfall. A flicker of confusion danced across the faces of the cadets. The name meant nothing to them, just another code name in a sea of drills and war games. But to Barrett, and to Emma, it was everything. His eyes met hers with a sharpness that cut through the haze of memory. You were there, he said, not as a question, but as a truth already known. Emma nodded, a nearly imperceptible motion, yet it felt as thunderous as a detonation in the heavy silence. Barrett drew in a breath, slow and deliberate, as though inhaling the weight of the past. I was there too, he continued, his voice tightening with the burden of memory. Not from the beginning. I came in with the extraction team. When we got there, we believed no one had survived. Comms were dead. The team was presumed lost. The site, completely overrun. He glanced back at the cadets, pausing long enough for the gravity to settle in. But someone stayed behind. Someone moved through that burning wreck of a battlefield, dragging the wounded, shielding them from fire, performing surgery with field kits in broken buildings, working in the dirt, in the dark, without sleep or backup, refusing to leave anyone behind. His voice grew quiet again, but his tone never lost its steel. That someone was her. Gasps slipped through the ranks of cadets, disbelief slowly transforming into awe. This was Emma, the quiet medic they thought was just soft-spoken, the one they'd overlooked during drills, who never boasted, who never pushed to be seen. Barrett raised a dog tag, the metal glinting beneath the sky. These numbers, he said, his voice reverent, aren't for show. They're not medals, not a symbol of glory. They mark where it happened, when it happened, and what it cost. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting them feel it. Operation Nightfall wasn't just a mission gone wrong. It was a tragedy, a disaster. And because of her, 11 of us made it back. 11. She could have left. She had the chance, but she didn't. She stayed. She fought. She saved us. Not a sound moved across the field. Boom. Even the wind stilled, as if it too was listening, too solemn to interrupt. Barrett's voice, though soft now, struck harder than any shout. Never again. Never again underestimate the quiet ones. Never mistake calm for weakness or silence for fear. When the world falls apart, it's people like her who hold the pieces together. The dog tag gleamed between his fingers, metal that now seemed fragile, sacred, as if it carried the memory of every scream, every life every breath fought for. And in that stillness, under the weight of that dog tag, something fundamental shifted at Falcon Ridge. The cadets came that morning expecting lessons in tactics, maybe lectures on discipline or theory, but what they received was something else entirely. A glimpse at the kind of strength that doesn't need to roar. A strength forged in silence, tempered by loss, and carried in the heart of a woman who had stared hell in the face and said, "Not today." They saw Emma Riley as she truly was, not just a medic, not just quiet, not just kind, but unbreakable. The field felt sacred now. The air hung heavy, reverent, General Barrett stood there, still holding her tag as if it were glass, fragile not in its form, but in what it held. The numbers etched into it weren't just coordinates or timestamps. They were lives, memories, ghosts. The cadets watched him, their eyes wide, pulses pounding. Seconds ago, they thought they understood what made someone strong. But that idea was crumbling now, replaced with something deeper, something raw and real. Barrett finally broke the silence again. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Let me tell you who she is. Let me tell you what she's done. He looked down at the tag once more, then back up at their stunned faces. While the rest of us were making noise, trying to prove something with volume, she was in the shadows, proving something far more difficult. She proved that when everything goes wrong, it's not the loudest voice that saves you. He let the weight of that truth settle before speaking again. Operation Nightfall. Even the instructors, seasoned, hardened, shifted uncomfortably at the name. They had heard of it, of course. Rumors, whispers, the kind that circulated late at night between those who'd seen too much and those smart enough not to ask. But the full story had been buried deep. Redacted reports, locked files, silence. A mission so dangerous, so catastrophic, Barrett said, that it was scrubbed from the records. Not a word in briefings, not a trace in the books. We were told to forget it, erase it, pretend it never happened. His eyes softened again as they returned to Emma. And now there was grief in them, respect, a sorrow that had never fully left. We lost good people that day, he said. Cut off, ambushed, outnumbered, doomed by bad intel and worse timing. He shook his head once. Missions like that, if you're lucky, someone, somewhere remembers what really happened. But the names of the heroes, they vanish. They vanish with the smoke. Then he pointed toward Emma, silent, composed, standing with the weight of 100 memories in her stillness. But she was there. She remembers. And now, so would they. Her eyes didn't flinch. Emma Riley stood motionless, her gaze steady and unwavering. She had been the assigned medic on that mission. Her role was clear: support the unit, then pull back when things fell apart. But when everything did fall apart, she didn't leave. When the helicopters were torn from the sky in a rain of fire, when communications went dead and silence filled the radios, when the retreat order came through loud and final, she stayed. General Barrett took a deep breath, his voice firmer now as he addressed the cadets. 72 hours, he said. 72 hours behind enemy lines with no reinforcements, no resupply, nothing but what she could scavenge and carry. And in those 72 hours, she moved the wounded under gunfire, patched them up with scraps and grit, and kept 11 men alive, including me. The cadets turned their eyes toward Emma, and it was as if they were seeing her for the first time. The girl they once dismissed as soft. The girl they'd teased for being too quiet, too gentle. The girl they had whispered about behind her back, wondering if she even belonged here. A tall cadet named Cooper, one of the loudest critics, swallowed hard. The color had drained from his face. His voice trembled as he spoke, barely audible. 11 lives. She saved 11? Barrett nodded slowly, his expression solemn. 11 families got their loved ones back. 11 mothers didn't have to bury their sons. 11 names never made it to a black wall because of her. Shame rolled through the ranks like a cold wind. The cadets shifted, eyes lowered, unable to meet Emma's gaze. Reality had finally cut through their assumptions like a blade. Barrett let the silence stretch, heavy and instructive. Then he spoke again, quieter this time, the weight of every word pressing down. Strength doesn't come from the noise you make. It's not about how loud you can shout or how big your presence is. Strength is in the choices you make when no one's watching. It's in the hands that stay steady while others shake. It's in the voice that remains calm when panic sets in. It's in doing what's right, even when no one will ever know or cheer you on. He looked over the cadets, locking eyes with them one by one. And here's the truth. Emma's story, it's not some myth or one-of-a-kind miracle. There are people just like her all around us. Heroes who don't wear capes or demand attention, but who live this kind of courage every day. His voice deepened, carrying more than just words. It carried memory, reverence. Think of the medics who ran into the smoke on 9/11, not knowing if the towers would collapse, and stayed to carry the wounded. Think of firefighters who walk into flames everyone else is running from, not for glory, but because it's their duty. Or the old veterans sitting quietly at the back of a parade, wearing faded caps and carrying memories that weigh more than any medal. They don't brag, they don't boast, they don't need to. He paused, then added, "Remember Desmond Doss, World War II medic? Wouldn't even touch a weapon. They called him a coward, but when the bullets flew, it was Desmond who stayed behind. Desmond who pulled the wounded off the ridge. Desmond who whispered, 'Lord, let me get one more.' He saved 75 lives." Another beat. Clara Barton didn't shout orders on the battlefield, but she was there, an angel to the wounded during the Civil War. She brought medicine, hope, and a fierce kind of love. Then she founded the American Red Cross, so her mission could live on long after the battles were over. Barrett allowed a small, unexpected smile. And yes, even Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, a man who shaped generations not with volume, but with kindness, gentleness, and quiet bravery. He taught us that courage doesn't have to roar. He stepped forward now, lowering the dog tag he'd been holding as if setting it down on sacred ground. His voice was low but firm. Our society tells us leaders have to be loud, that strength is swagger and decibels. But the strongest among us are usually the ones you don't notice until everything's falling apart. They carry burdens so others don't have to. They show up, do the work, save the lives, and then fade into the background without asking for thanks. He turned fully to the cadets, his tone final, unwavering. "Let her be your example," he said, "not the loudest voice, not the biggest ego. Let it be the one who shows up, who acts, who saves, and who never asks for anything in return." Emma stood still. She didn't blink, didn't smile. She didn't bask in the moment or search the crowd for admiration. She didn't need to. In that still moment, under the open sky of Falcon Ridge, the cadets finally saw what strength really looked like, and it would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The field remained hushed long after General Barrett's words drifted into silence. The cadets, once so quick to mock and judge, stood anchored in place, shaken. The ground beneath their feet felt different now, because in truth it was. Emma's world and the perception of her had flipped in a single morning. But the moment that truly left an impact didn't come from General Barrett, nor any commanding figure. It came from Emma herself, and no one had expected it. She had no intention of speaking. Emma was never one for grand speeches or dramatic gestures. She was the kind who let her actions speak, who preferred to do the work rather than talk about it. But something about that moment, the heavy silence among her teammates, the way realization was dawning on their faces, pushed her to raise her head. She took a single, purposeful step forward. Her voice, always gentle, now carried with surprising clarity. Maybe because, for the first time, everyone was actually listening. "I didn't stay at Nightfall because I'm brave," she said, her gaze unwavering, her tone even. "I stayed because I didn't know what else to do." The honesty in her words was disarming. The situation was chaos. People were dying, there were no orders, no clear plan, only choices. And I just kept making the only choice I could live with, to Tracy. She paused, letting the weight of that settle into the stillness around her. "Strength isn't about how loud you can yell," she continued. "It's not about pretending you're fearless or barking commands like you've got everything under control. Real strength is what you do when you're scared out of your mind, when everything's unraveling, when nothing makes sense, and there are no easy answers. Strength is keeping your mind steady enough to act, to help, even when your hands are trembling." The field remained utterly silent. The cadets who once mocked her quiet nature now leaned in, hanging on every word. "Out there, on the battlefield, or in life, it won't matter how loud you can shout. It won't matter how much you can bench press or how fast you can run. What will matter is whether you can stay focused when it counts, whether you can see what needs to be done and do it." Emma's eyes swept slowly across the gathered faces, meeting each pair of eyes with a quiet conviction. Strength isn't noise, it's resolve. And every one of you has that inside you if you choose it. She didn't need to shout. Her words didn't thunder, but they struck deep, steady as a heartbeat, not with the intensity of a drill instructor's command, but with the power of lived truth. That day, at Falcon Ridge, something shifted. The cadets learned to recognize a different kind of leadership, the kind that didn't demand attention, but earned it, the kind that whispered truth strong enough to move mountains. In the months that followed, Emma's quiet power was recognized again, this time not with applause, but responsibility. She was assigned to lead a newly formed medical support unit, not as a ceremonial gesture, not because of what General Barrett had said, and not because a myth had begun to swirl around her name. She was chosen because when it came to selecting someone who could hold a team together in the middle of hell, there simply was no better option. Emma didn't just train them in medical procedures. She drilled into them a mindset. She taught that panic spreads like fire, but calm can smother it. That fear is normal, but surrendering to it isn't. That the strongest person in the room is often the one who lowers the tension, not adds to it. She put them through the ringer, mass casualty simulations, ambush drills, disaster responses. She created chaos on purpose so they could learn how to navigate through it. She showed them how to breathe through fear, how to silence the mental noise, and focus on the one thing, the one life they could save in that moment. And then came the real test, deployment, a mission where real danger loomed and real lives hung in the balance. When it ended, when the last chopper lifted off from that ravaged field, every single member of Emma's team came home. Not one was lost, because when the unthinkable happened, they didn't freeze. They didn't fall apart. They didn't let the noise win. They remembered what Emma had shown them. They stayed clear. They stayed calm. They made the next right decision, and they saved lives. And here's where we stop and really look at what Emma's story means. This isn't just about combat. It's not just about battlefield heroism or medicine under fire. Emma's story is bigger than that. Because the truth is, uniform or not, we all face battles. Life throws us into chaos, into moments that test us, moments when it feels like everything's crashing down. When fear coils tight in our chest and people around us look for someone, anyone to hold it together, to lead with clarity. Think about it. In a family, strength isn't the parent who shouts the loudest when disaster hits. It's the one who stays composed when the car breaks down, when the baby won't stop crying, when the bills pile up. It's the one who keeps the tone steady, who doesn't ignite panic but instead radiates resilience, who becomes the calm in the storm. In the workplace, strength isn't about pounding the table or commanding attention in meetings. It isn't the loudest voice or the most dominating presence. True strength lies in the leader who listens with intention, who keeps a scattered team grounded when everything goes off track, who becomes a calm anchor in the middle of a crisis, not because they know everything, but because they know how to lead others toward answers. In the community, it's not the one shouting at town halls that carries strength. It's the quiet neighbor who checks in on the elderly couple during a storm, the dependable volunteer who keeps showing up week after week without applause, the dedicated teacher who stays late after school to guide a struggling student toward understanding. Emma Riley showed us something profound. Real strength doesn't come from putting on a show when the world is watching. It's defined by the decisions we make when no one's looking. It's found in those moments when you would be completely justified in walking away, when no one would judge you for giving up, and yet you choose to stay, to endure, to hold firm. That kind of strength becomes a lifeline for others. It's what steadies the unsteady, what allows people to catch their breath, to find clarity, to believe again. Every one of us has that strength within us. We each have the ability to be the calm in someone else's storm, to prove that courage doesn't always roar. It can whisper. And when it whispers, it can move mountains. Emma Riley never set out to be a hero. She didn't chase recognition or wait for applause. She simply made a choice, again and again, to act when others froze, to stay composed when others panicked, to lead when chaos threatened to consume everything. Because of those choices, she saved lives. That is a strength we should all strive to emulate, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that deserves it. So when life throws its hardest test your way, when someone turns to you in fear or uncertainty, remember Emma Riley. Choose the kind of strength that speaks softly but holds everything together, one calm, steady hand at a time. After the dust settled over Falcon Ridge, Emma's name wasn't carved into marble or blasted from loudspeakers. That wouldn't have been her way. Instead, her legacy lived on in quieter, more enduring places, in the minds of those who once doubted her and in the hearts of those shaped by her example. In the center of the base's medical training wing, there hangs a single-frame photo, a close-up of Emma's dog tag from Operation Nightfall. The metal is worn smooth by time, its edges rough with the hand-etched numbers she carved herself. The hour, the coordinates, the pacho, a record of the lives lost and the ones she fought to save. Beneath that image, a plaque rests. No fanfare, no grand speeches, just a few quiet words. True strength whispers. A simple truth, but one that echoes powerfully through the halls. Every cadet that walks through that space passes beneath her story. And in doing so, they're reminded that greatness isn't measured by the volume of your voice or the firmness of your grip, but by what you do when everything is falling apart. But Falcon Ridge didn't stop with a tribute. They introduced a new required training module. Operation Nightfall, Leadership Under Fire. This wasn't a dramatization of loss or failure. It was a real-world case study in resilience, composure, and courageous leadership under the most extreme circumstances. Cadets don't just learn what went wrong. They study how Emma transformed that disaster into survival for 11 soldiers who likely wouldn't be alive without her. They examine the precision of her decisions, the clarity of her mind, the unwavering grip of her determination when the easiest thing would have been to break. And here's what matters most. Emma Riley's legacy doesn't belong to Falcon Ridge alone, because there are people just like her walking among us every single day, often unnoticed. The nurse who stays long after their shift ends, holding the hand of a frightened patient who doesn't want to be alone. The firefighter who runs headfirst into the flames when everyone else is scrambling to escape. The quiet neighbor who shovels the snow from an elderly couple's driveway in the freezing dark without expecting thanks. Emma's strength wasn't loud, but it was deep, unwavering, and transformative. And that kind of strength is within reach for all of us. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that, when no one's watching, quietly chooses to do the right thing, again and again. Here is the rewritten version in natural, creative American English, expanded thoughtfully while preserving every emotional detail and internal reflection from the original, without adding anything that wasn't there. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world is still and no one is watching, there are people who rise, not for glory, not for recognition, but simply because something needs to be done. Like the teacher who quietly dips into their own modest paycheck to buy notebooks, pencils, or winter coats so their students never have to go without. No announcement, no post, no praise expected, just action. Quiet, steady, and deeply human. These are the real heroes. They don't seek out the spotlight or crave a headline. They don't tell the world what they did or wait for someone to clap. They move through life with a quiet strength, showing up where it matters most, doing the hard things, not for applause, but because they believe it's right, because they can. Because to them, being strong isn't about being seen. It's about standing firm, about being present when it counts, about doing what needs to be done without fanfare or fuss. So I ask you now, who's your Emma Riley? Who is that person in your life who embodies strength without ever needing to announce it? Who has shown up in moments when you were lost or afraid, not with loud words or grand gestures, but with calm, unwavering presence? Who is your quiet hero, the one who stepped forward when it would have been easier to turn away? Think about them. Hold their name in your heart. And if you feel moved to, share their story. Let's honor those people here. Let's fill this space with the names of the ones who hold the world together in quiet, powerful ways. The ones most people never notice, but who make all the difference. Because in a world that seems obsessed with being loud, with grabbing attention and shouting the hardest, we can't forget the value of those who choose something else. Those who choose calm over case, steadiness over spectacle, and courage that whispers instead of roars. As this story comes to a close, I want to leave you with something to carry forward. Gentleness is not weakness. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The truth is, it's often the strongest force there is. Real courage doesn't always come with a shout. It doesn't always arrive wrapped in bold declarations. Sometimes the most powerful kind of strength is quiet. It's the kind that keeps people safe. That gets them home. That stays focused and clear when fear would be the easier path. Emma Riley didn't do what she did because she was fearless. She wasn't. She saved lives not because she didn't feel afraid, but because she chose to rise above it. She chose to stay steady. She chose to act. She chose others over herself. That's the kind of strength we need more of, not just in the stories we tell, but in the way we live. As parents, as siblings, as sons and daughters, in the tough moments, in our workplaces when challenges mount, as friends, as teammates, as leaders, in our neighborhoods, when our communities are hurting or in need, that quiet strength, that steady courage, that's what truly holds us all together. So if Emma's story touched something in you, if it reminded you of someone who's been that quiet anchor in your life, or helped you see strength from a new angle, I hope you'll support this message. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories like Emma's, stories that celebrate the courage most people overlook. Because the world doesn't need more noise. The world needs more Emma Rileys. And more people like your Emma Riley, the one who chooses to be calm, to be kind, to be strong, not for credit, but because it's simply who they are. Thank you for watching. And remember, when your moment comes, choose the kind of strength that whispers, because that's the kind that truly changes everything.